Good evening. I'm Chris Pareja, and you're watching The Right Side. This is the show where we look at today's issues from an admittedly conservative perspective. Tonight, since it's our first night of taping, we're going to be talking with Howard Myers, the president of the Conservative Forum and one of our sponsors, about what really is conservatism all about. Howard, thanks for joining us this evening.
Thank you for having me.
So when the term conservative comes up, a lot of people have maybe preconceived notions about what it means to be a conservative. They might think that we hate old people. We want to see them all thrown off of Social Security. They may think that we're all racist homophobes who don't like minorities or people who prefer a same-sex type of relationship. They may think that we are warmongers and our whole mission in life is to take over the world. But what I find is conservatism is a little bit like French toast. People have their own recipe and the flavor that tastes best to them. So I wanted to just talk to you as someone who's in and around the conservative community all the time about what it means for you personally to be a conservative and where you might even differ with other people who are conservative. So just to start things off, when did you discover you were conservative and when did you go public about it?
Well, that's interesting that you would ask about that. Because I haven't been conservative all my life. I was conservative when I was younger, and I joined the Air Force. I was in the Air Force for 4 years, and I was fairly conservative. And I went through a mind-bending experience of going to college.
Okay. And
I was introduced to all the professors that knew better than anybody else, and although I was older than some of the students because I had been in the service, still I was intimidated and it was in awe of these professors. And admittedly, they did bend my mind in the leftward direction. So that by the time I finished college, I was fairly left-leaning. In fact, while I was on campus in college, I was, if you don't mind me telling you, I was a very good hippie.
Okay.
And I really didn't get my mind right until working for a number of years. And I'll be very frank with you that one of the people that had a major influence on my getting it right is Rush Limbaugh.
Okay.
And so it just made me look at different opinions. A friend of mine that I had a lot of respect for was listening to him. And so I thought, well, maybe I'll listen to this because I'd kind of become disenchanted with some of the left and the liberal ideas. And so I was more open to looking at other areas. And so I did. And when I started looking at things logically, they kept coming up conservative.
Okay. And so talk to me about that. You said you were a conservative as a child. What did that mean? How old were you before you burnt your first book or started quoting Bible verses on street corners? I mean, what was conservatism as a child?
Well, the conservative in my mind was that I felt that government should be run more like a business.
Okay.
And when I was in the Air Force, I was fairly patriotic, and that isn't always a litmus test between conservative or liberal. I'm not, in that school, but it was something that, for me, I was patriotic. I was proud of my country. I didn't mind serving my country, but so I wasn't really, I went to church when I was younger. But that wasn't it. It was just like I felt like the government should be helping you, not getting in the way. It shouldn't be real big, but just more like a patriotic thing. And I got to get into school, and then it started getting really foggy.
Okay. So patriotism, like you said, isn't a litmus test. I've known people that are left-leaning, or they consider themselves fiscally conservative and socially liberal, which means that they're not homophobic and they are not a Klan member, usually in their minds. But they, in your particular perspective, like you said, they were patriotic, you were patriotic, but it sounded like you had a lot of libertarian types of leaning too. The smaller government, let me live my life and then leave me alone.
Well, yes, but I wouldn't have been sophisticated enough to be able to label it or identify it or to really say what it was. I certainly wouldn't put that label on it.
Okay. And so you said your mind was twisted to the left a little bit. Talk to me about what that means, because I think there is confusion about the left versus right spectrum.
Well, I think it's to me, in my own experience, it was the college professors basically telling us that it was almost anti-American. It's like you go through some of the history lessons, history 17A and 17B. Right. It was anti-America 17A, anti-America 17B. It was, and the professors putting their own spin on it as to why it was always America's fault.
Okay. And are you able to recollect any examples of that kind of anti-Americanism?
Probably more, the one thing that sticks in my mind probably more than anything else was the demonization of the Founding Fathers.
Okay.
And how terrible they were, and all the white European guilt
slave
thing.
Owners.
Yeah. And I find out how untrue that is nowadays.
Right, or how they fought to actually, for example, the 2/3 clause is one that comes up very regularly.
Right.
And it was a situation where that was a compromise because the South didn't want to let go of their slaves, as an example. But it does get kind of twisted. So then from that, you said listening to Rush Limbaugh helped kind of shift you back in the other direction. But as on the university level, I'm curious as to whether or not you feel that one of the things that's missing in the current education system, and maybe even back to the time of when you were going, it's almost a push to teach children what to think versus how to think. Do you think that critical thinking or application of critical thinking has helped you in your transition toward a more lean to the right?
I'm not sure if I fully understand the way you phrased the question in terms of, you're saying that did the lack of critical thinking have something to do with it, or you're suggesting that it's becoming more teaching people what to think rather than how to think?
Well, I mean, for me, for example, as I've been out in the world, people say, gosh, you're pretty conservative for such a young guy. And they say normally, the saying is, if you're a conservative when you're young, you have no heart, and if you're conservative if you're liberal when you're old, you have no brain, right? Yeah. But along the way, people say, well, how did you get so conservative so young? It's like, well, as soon as I could start to read for myself instead of what I was being told to read, and as soon as I could apply critical thought to it, like you, a lot of my thoughts started leaning more to the right. Or to a more conservative kind of a bent, and I was curious as to whether or not that was an aspect of your transformation as well.
Yeah, it was. And if you could graph the conservative versus liberal view, then you would see the liberal content going up as I was in college, and then the longer I got away from college, then the less content of liberal thought I had. Because I had more time, the fog was clearing. I had more time to think for myself, and what Rush did was make it okay for me to think about conservatism. To be honest with you, it's like maybe it's okay to think about that. Maybe because I've had some misgivings about some of my previous values, and maybe it's okay to look at some of the conservative ideas. Maybe it's not so bad. And looking at it, and I realized that, it just does make a lot of sense. If I'm rational and not thinking with my heart, then, I'm thinking with my brain, then I can see that there's a difference here. Right.
And so, I didn't tell you I was going to ask you this, but are you registered Republican, Democrat, Independent? Where do you fall with political affiliation?
I'm currently a registered Republican, and I used to be registered as a Libertarian, and one of the main reasons I changed was because I wanted to vote in the primary, and I didn't really have a legitimate vote in the primary unless I was registered with one of the major parties. Right. And now with this open primary, I don't know how that's going to work, but I might change my registration because, quite frankly, the Republican Party or some of the Republican leaders that I've seen aren't, they talk conservative, but when you see how they vote, when you see what they do, I'm not so happy.
Well, and I am in agreement. I see that as of today, I heard the stats of 37% of the population is registered Democrat, 34, I think, might be
Republican. Yeah,
Republican.
It's independent. There's like
it's 40, or
yeah.
it's bigger.
Yeah.
It might be 27 Republican.
Yeah,
but people, I think, are getting fed up really with both parties. And there are conservatives on the Democrat side, there are conservatives on the Republican side, there are conservatives that just want nothing to do with either of them, and then there are the others, libertarians and things in the middle. So, but just based on your answer, one of the questions I would have asked you is, do you feel there's a difference between republicanism and conservatism? Because they're always lumped into the same category. If you talk to Republicans on the street, not so much. Tell me about the differences as you perceive them in a little more detail.
Well, one of the things that I'm becoming kind of fond of this one term I'm hearing. I say fond of it, meaning I'm relating to it, I'm understanding it, I'm liking it. It defines things because it starts talking about the establishment Republicans. Mm-hmm. People like Karl Rove, that I think is an establishment Republican, not a conservative necessarily, maybe a good strategist, and certainly a good Republican, but is he really a conservative? And there's people like this in the Republican Party that I don't think are really all that conservative from my point of view. They don't believe in small government. They only believe a government that's run by them.
Right.
And so that makes it right, not smaller. And so they're going to spend taxes just as poorly as some of the liberal politicians, because they're a politician first. Right. And that's where I differentiate between a conservative and a Republican.
And I'm in full agreement with you. The question is, can you give us some examples of people who are, you look at our current field of quote-unquote conservatives, and you've got Newt Gingrich, and you've got Mitt Romney, and John Huntsman, and Ron Paul, and then you've got Rick Perry, and then who's still left in there. But so that nobody's really seeming to be excited about any of them. Tell me about where you see incongruences between conservative versus...
Yeah. When we get into specifics like this, you have to really make clear that if I comment on these types of specifics, that I'm speaking for myself, not for the forum.
Absolutely.
And I want to make sure anybody...
You are properly disclaimed.
Anybody that might watch this at 4 o'clock in the morning realizes that I'm not necessarily speaking for everybody in the forum when I'm talking about some of the specifics.
Right.
And I think that in the current field, as it stands now,
I'm not asking you to pick a winner. Just talk to me about incongruencies.
But looking at what people say they're conservative, and then you look at their record. Mm-hmm. And not, some of them don't have that much of a record. I was speaking with somebody, I think it was earlier today, that was fairly conservative, and we were talking about, whether or not the politicians should be paid on par with some of the CEOs in private industry. If you want that kind of talent, should you have to pay more money? But our founding fathers didn't see it that way. They think that one of the advantages of having a citizen politician is that this person isn't going to pass bad laws because they're going back to their old life and they're going to have to live under them. This was their thinking. Right. How far away are we from that?
I can tell you about my congressman.
Right. And how many of them are worth anything? But the idea that, a career politician, our founding fathers would never envision that. They would have term limits if they had envisioned that. They have never had any idea that somebody would want to be a politician for life.
And they warned against it.
Yeah. Well, that in the central bank.
But
yeah, it's crazy.
Right. And so in looking at that, how would you change things up in that regard? You think term limits are a good thing?
I might even take it a little bit further in terms of term limits. I think there should be a limit in the government. If you got somebody that goes from a representative to a senator to a president or something and spends their whole life in the government, I don't think that's a life spent in public service. I think that's a life spent serving the public in a completely different way.
Right.
Just like have your dog serviced.
Servicing the public as opposed to serving the public.
Exactly. Better put.
Right.
But and that's what I think happens. And so, you know, if I had the magic wand, I would go back to where we used to be, where people would come in, they would do their time serving the public, and go back to their business, and they would not pass these crazy, idiotic laws that they don't have to live under, because they would have to live under them. Right. I mean, the idea that Congress doesn't have to live under the laws they pass is one of the biggest problems we have.
Right. And we've heard recently of politicians at a state level, governors, et cetera, saying maybe what we should do is tell the politicians that there are not going to be any penalties. We leave them alone. We don't hold elections this year, and then we just let them work it out regardless of the consequences. What do you think of that kind of idea?
I think somebody may have actually suggested that in a semi-serious way. I remember hearing it, and that we just suspend elections because, well, you've been a bad politician, so you don't have to stay there until you get it worked out. Right. Well, there are some that are concerned that we may be running out of time to have free elections.
Right, right. So as a conservative and as a currently registered Republican, I'm not going to ask you if you've ever been a member of the Tea Party, but the question is, what are your thoughts on them? Because even within the Republican circles, what I've heard is people say, you know, I'm a Republican, I've been a lifelong Republican, and but I'm not so sure about those Tea Party people and their agenda. And so I just, interesting in what they're saying, ask them, well, what do you mean? And they say, well, I like their fiscal agenda, but I don't like their social agenda. And I say, really, that's interesting, because they don't have a social agenda.
Right.
It's all about the free markets. It's about constitutionally limited government and being basically fiscal responsibility. What are your thoughts on the Tea Party, what it's doing to enhance or defile the name of conservatism as a whole?
Well, one of the things that's interesting, you've hit on a lot of really good points there. But the reason that the Tea Party, in fact, it's amazing that the Tea Party has survived at all, considering the amount of pressure put on it from the governmental officials and the media. And the media is, I mean, it's like the colleges, you know, it's a how do you say cesspool of liberalism without being offensive? I don't know. But I mean, it really is. I mean, the liberal media, and there's very little other kind, is out there demagoguing and doing everything they can to demonize the Tea Party or anybody that doesn't support big government. And the Tea Party has been labeled with anything. They tried every label they could. I mean, they tried to say they were racist. They tried to say they were AstroTurf, you know, sponsored by big, big rich conservatives. Mm-hmm. And none of it stuck because it wasn't true. But there's still that tinge, that kind of a smell to it that people say, I don't know. If I say I like the Tea Party, then people might think I'm a kook.
Right.
And like you say, they say, oh, I don't like their social agenda. Well, I don't blame you. I don't either. They don't have one.
Right.
You know, I mean, what's to like or not like? It doesn't exist.
Right.
And most people, it's like conservatism. Most people, if you compared what they really want and what they don't like, they would find that they would have a lot more in common with conservatives,
right, or
with the Tea Party than they were aware of. Right. But all they have is a reaction to a label that they've been given.
Well, and I think what you're saying is spot on. We're very quick to label people in our society, and we've been conditioned to do it that way, and especially when it comes to politics. You've got this minority group or this special interest group or another one, and we're pitted against each other. Even within the Republican or conservative circles, there's a lot of fragmentation that people may not know exists. Even within the current presidential nominees to be, there are major fights and people who will fight violently for their candidate and in opposition of another, because there is such a fractured kind of a thing. Do you think that after this election cycle is over, first of all, do you think a third party will emerge during this election cycle, just looking forward into the future? And do you think that there is a possibility that another party will pop up over the next 4 years and between now and the next presidential election? Pretty
interesting thoughts. I think that I think there's probably, in just my own opinion and looking at what it is, I think there's probably a 50% chance there will be at least one third-party candidate come out of this. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if that'll be, Ron Paul or somebody.
Donald Trump.
Yeah, Trump,
Hillary Clinton, for that matter, is one that's being proposed.
Who knows, right? I mean, any number of people. I mean, there could be, there could be a third and a fourth party come out of this and make it a real free-for-all. It's hard to say. And somebody like Ron Paul, for example, ran as a third party. He would probably draw votes from both parties. Mm-hmm. Who would actually get hurt the most there.
Right. And
so it's really hard to say what would happen with that. But I do think that if we get through this next election cycle, if Obama is reelected, and then I absolutely believe there will be a third party come out.
Okay.
Because I think that at that point it'll be like, what do you have to lose?
Okay. Great. Well, we appreciate your time and helping explain to us what conservatism is all about, and we appreciate the feedback that you've given us on helping to craft the show and everything else. And we accept your disclaimer that all views expressed by Howard Myers were strictly the property of Howard Myers, as opposed to opinions representing the Conservative Forum. On that note, we're going to switch gears, and we're going to make you take off the Howard Myers hat. You no longer have your identity. It's been stolen, and you're now replaced as Howard Myers of the Conservative Forum. And we'd like to talk a little bit more about what the Conservative Forum itself does, and a little bit about why they've chosen to help sponsor a conservatively oriented television show. So tell us a little bit about the Conservative Forum.
Okay. Thank you. And it's a good story to tell. It really is. It's very interesting. And some of the things that we're doing in the Conservative Forum now, we've been building on this and growing for the last 8 years. And we're getting to a critical mass now where we have the ability to do and reach out and do things that we couldn't otherwise do, such as helping to sponsor this show. This was an idea that was brought to us by yourself and some other people were involved in it. And we said, oh, this sounds good. This is something we can sponsor. It's very much like some of the other things we do to try to promote the principles of American liberty. We have a Constitution discussion group that meets once a month. They discuss the Constitution, learn more about the Constitution, how it affects us. That's an excellent program, but out of that came a scholarship program. And so right now, this year, we have a scholarship program. We're going to be giving 2 $1,000 awards to local seniors in our high schools. Right. And the way they earn those is by submitting an essay on constitutional principles. Right. So, I mean, to me, this whole thing is just snowballing. I love it. This is great. We're trying to get the word out. The Constitution matters. We're supposed to be living by the Constitution. Right. And this is what the forum is about, is these kinds of principles. When we have our meetings, we have tables at these meetings that we allow conservative groups to use these tables to distribute information and get out their point of view. We don't charge people for those tables. It's a public service in our point of view. The only charge is for the price of admission for whatever meeting that happens to be. So I mean, just these things we're doing to try to get the message out about what conservatism is, what the Constitution is all about, and what American liberty is about.
Well, and it's also a great environment to see that you're not standing there by yourself as a crazy kook conservative when you see 200 to 500 people around you who are interested in similar topics and interested in protecting their freedom and really understanding what's happening around them and how they can get involved and active. So we appreciate not only the sponsorship, but also the work that you're doing to educate the community in that way. Tell me a little bit about the types of guests you bring in to the Conservative Forum for your main monthly meetings.
Yeah, this is something that attracted me to the Conservative Forum 5 years ago when I joined, was some of the caliber of speakers that we're having. We had a debate on the global warming, and it had like 600 people. Was one of the things that really attracted me. And some of the speakers we've had, I really like I like going and buying a book, getting it autographed by the author, like David Horowitz, Ward Connerly, John Lott, I mean, some really high-powered people. Now we had recently Victor Davis Hanson. We have Andrew Breitbart, Jesse Lee Peterson, Star Parker. I mean, some really terrific speakers that we've had, and that's the reason we're growing. And of course, it's snowballs, because when we're growing, we can get these kind of speakers. It helps us grow. That means we can get better speakers.
Right.
We're not better speakers, or good speakers. I mean,
right.
you don't get better than some of these guys.
Well, tell us who's coming next and how we can get more information.
Okay, next month we have Dr. Gary Wolfram from the Hillsdale College.
Okay.
After that, we have Mark
Meckler.
Thank you, sir. Mark Meckler. He's a co-founder of the Tea Party Patriots. And we also have then Brian Sussman. He's a local radio personality and an author. And after that, we have, again, David Horowitz is joining us again. I'm really looking forward to that. And
so tell us how to find out about the meetings and the website.
Well, the easiest way is to go to the website. You can find out everything you need to know at www.theconservativeforum.com. We meet in Mountain View at 432 Stirling Road. That's the IFES Portuguese Hall. The doors open at 6:15 p.m. Program starts at 7 p.m. sharply. Always begin with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Great. Well, thank you very much for all you do, Howard.
And thank you.
And we look forward to hearing from you more in the future.
Thank you.
At this point in the show, we get to the final time frame, and we always like to end with a segment that's a little bit more fun. And just because we're conservative doesn't mean we don't like to have fun and that we're uptight. And it also doesn't mean we're not afraid to poke holes in Republicans if they decide that they're going to behave in ways that aren't in our best interest. And so tonight, we want to actually present an award to John Boehner and the Congress, Top Flight Golf Ball Awards. And what this has to do with is in the last month, they've passed or allowed to pass the tax cut extension bill. And so for those of you that haven't been tracking, what happened was the Republicans proposed that the payroll tax cuts, which are actually taking away from Social Security early to give people money now, different topic. But what they did was they were going to propose that a year would go by and the tax cut extension would go on. Instead, what happened was the Democrat Party decided that they wanted 2-month extension to go ahead, hold the U.S. hostage, and move that forward again at the end of the 2 months to a 12-month extension. So basically, the House passes a 12-month bill, it's shot down, they agree to 2 months, which makes them look silly, especially when they're being accused of not wanting a tax cut at all for the U.S. citizens. And then they get to look silly this time, and again in 2 months they'll look silly when the Democrats take responsibility for the 12-month extension. So you may be asking, why Top Flight golf balls? Well, the reality is, whether you are golfing or whether you are defending conservative principles and the U.S. economy, sometimes it takes balls that are designed to go to the distance. On that note, this is, again, Chris Pareja. You've joined us on the right side, and we look forward to sharing the issues with you from a conservative perspective sometime soon in the near future. Thanks.